is come to terms. But if we think that we have explained it, we are using the explanation in a very peculiar sense, which has nothing to do with the way we explain phenomena, giving their reasons, making them instances of general principles. I think we use the word explanation in rather an ambiguous term and move very quickly from one to the other, feeling that we have explained a phenomenon. I think that all explanation fails, and I really believe that the person who says we do not understand the ways of providence is much more honest, which is literally saying that we do not understand it.
So you think even the karma solution fails?
I think the karma solution also fails. Because
it
it is also trying to give a law-like statement.
And isn't the karma solution sort of like writing one check to cover another check, and you just keep pushing the problem back and back, but it never really
ultimately
gets solved?
No, it's also pushing forward and forward. So there is no, the problem is very different.
The problem is not so much pushing it forward, the problem is pushing it backward.
No, it's both ways, actually.
You know, because when Dr. Craig raised the question that in pantheism there's no distinction, I'm assuming you are then with the Advaita, the non-duality way of thinking, that the ultimate reality is one. If the ultimate reality is one and the ultimate reality is Brahman, where did this evil and wickedness come from?
Well, of course, you see, as you certainly are pretty well aware, that even this Vedantic thesis of the ultimate oneness of all being went through many, many different formulations to the extent to which they were able to admit differences within the oneness, and to the extent the differences were regarded to be mere unreal phenomena. So they were, it is not a very simple solution, which is enormously complex. And I know also that in Christian theology also the idea of God has gone through many, many different accounts. So what I was going to say is that there is an aspect of evil, moral evil, of which Christian theology, to my mind, has given a good solution, a good explanation to understand moral evil, tying it with freedom of will and tying that with God's great gift. But there is an aspect of evil which is irreducible to moral evil, and that's where my main problem, as I presented. As I said, I don't want to get into the problem of moral evil. And that aspect of evil is what I think remains always recalcitrant to all law-like explanations.
Let's move on to our next worldview. We're going to now hear from Dr. Bernard Lykken, representing a naturalist worldview.
If God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfectly benevolent, how can he allow evil and suffering to exist? Scholars know this question by the four-syllable name theodicy. The ancient Hebrews, those who wrote the Hebrew Bible, and those who wrote the Gospels, could see perfectly well that whatever God's purposes, they don't include ensuring justice in this life. Those who think as I do would say that the existence of senseless evil, suffering, show that the supposed properties of God, omnipotence, omniscience, and perfect goodness cannot exist without contradiction. Now, tonight, I'm only a physicist in a nest of theologians and philosophers. As you could tell, my worldview gave me the black hat, but I'm going to do my best. In life, in your life, it is rare that you can answer the question of why bad things happen to you or why evil exists. But in literature, it's possible to know the answer. I take as my text for this evening the Hebrew Bible's book of Job. In this great literary work, we know the answer. God has proposed Job to the Satan as a model human. Have you considered my servant Job? You will find no one like him on earth, a man of blameless and upright life, who fears God and sets his face against wrongdoing. The Satan needles God. Has not Job good reason to be God-fearing? Have you not hedged him round on every side with your protection, him and his family and all his possessions? Whatever he does, you have blessed, and his herds have increased beyond measure. but stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and then he will curse you to his face. Evidently, God is a gambling man and agrees to this vicious test that Satan has proposed. If Job responds to the torments that Satan has in mind by cursing God, Satan wins. If Job does not, God wins. Now, I wondered why anyone would take a bet against someone who is omniscient, but I'll leave that aside. With God's permission, the Satan arranges for all of Job's oxen and asses to be stolen and for the herdsmen to be killed. Then God's fire burns up Job's sheep and their shepherds. 3 groups of bandits steal Job's camels and kill their drivers. Finally, a whirlwind knocks the eldest son's house onto Job's 7 sons and 3 daughters, killing them. As Job mourns these disasters, he does not curse God. So, with God's permission, the Satan covers Job's body with running sores. Still, Job does not blaspheme, even though his wife encourages him to do so. Now, I'd like to say, by the way, that today, any modern hospital ethics committee or university research committee considering a proposed experiment involving human beings of this nature would absolutely reject it. But no one in ancient times thought to criticize God for allowing this experiment to take place. This is because moral values differ from one time to another, and they change through time. They are neither absolute nor objective. The only moral lawgiver is you and me. All of us together create through our social actions the moral codes by which we strive to live. Although many of our moral thoughts trace their roots to the ideas of these ancient people and earlier, we have learned much since that distant time. Some of their moral ideas were good and others were bad. The biblical text, for example, gives many rules regulating slavery, but so far as I know, does not condemn slavery as wrong. Here are the first 3 verses of Job. There lived in the land of Uz a man of blameless and upright life named Job, who feared God and set his face against wrongdoing. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen and 500 asses, with a large number of slaves. Thus Job was the greatest man in all the East. The fact that Job